Hello everyone and welcome to an animated new episode of the StudioMEcast. I am joined in the podcast lounge in StudioME by another special guest. If you like the sight and sound of this particular podcast, then you can book it online at StudioME.me. We'd be happy to see you for a free tour as well, so don't pass us up on that. And if you're not one to wait to be asked to subscribe, thank you. But if you are, hey, it would be cool if you subscribe. It's up to you. Glad you're here either way. But today I'm joined by a very, very special guest. He's a good friend of mine. We've worked together on a bunch of different projects. I've been begging him to get on the podcast for a little while now, and finally the schedule's lined up. So today I have with me VFX artist and 3D animator and many other things that fall under those two vast umbrellas, Jesse Kaufer. Jesse, thanks for joining me, buddy. How's it going?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Here, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Glad we're
Get this
doing
going.
this.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite visual effects shot?
A favorite shot?
Yeah.
That is tough to say. I like the shots. I don't know if I have a specific one. There's a number of great ones. I guess actually one of the first ones that comes to mind, it's generally the shots that mix all the different kinds of visual effects, special effects, and real, actors with digital, with maybe a miniature, something like that. Mixing all these things together generally is the coolest kind of stuff when you can make that all work together. There's a shot in The Lord of the Rings where the camera sees Gandalf up on the tower, and it pans around the whole area. You see Gandalf up in the tower, then the camera flies down into this cavern, and all of it together just makes this really cool long sequence where you've seen all kinds of different effects, practical and digital, kind of like working together. So that's one that sticks out at my top of my head.
Yeah, having those kinds of things together is really, it's always inspiring to me whenever you've got that many different departments working together and it works. It doesn't look like they just, gave the VFX artist not enough time to fix their mistakes. It looks like the way it's supposed to be. A lot of visual effects stuff out there, though, can be used to solve problems that happen on the day of filming.
Very true.
It's logo removal, stuff like that.
Wardrobe fixes.
What's your experience with that kind of thing been like?
It's a lot of power cable ended up being in the shot. A stinger is in the shot, or maybe a sign in the background that isn't desirable, or you think of a better idea or something that's more fitting with the lore or something like that. So yeah, it can be a good thing. It's definitely something you want to try to avoid, but it's kind of one of those necessary evils sometimes, and can really help enhance the film. So it's not always a bad thing, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a shot you did that is amazing, which was, we just had Lydia Zagorski on as a guest.
Oh yeah,
and she's
great.
pitching Aramis, right?
Yeah.
And you're very much responsible for the big money shot at the end of the proof of concept of, if you haven't seen it, everybody go see the previous episode and check out the links in that with Lydia Zagorski, or it might be 2 episodes ago, whatever. Lydia Zagorski's episode, check it out. But at the end of that proof of concept short, there's this burning building in the distance.
Yes, a temple.
And it looks, it's flawless. Like, it's a big, it's great because things build up to it. It's like this big wow thing. Can you tell us, I feel like that's a great example of what you were saying before of having a lot of things work together to
definitely
make one shot. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of getting a shot like that, or specifically that shot, done? What was that like? Because I heard a little bit of it, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah, well, it went through a lot of phases. We only had a month, so we were trying to keep things simple so it didn't drag on forever. There was talk of different placement on the hill of where the temple would be, and we kind of had to work with the weather, which wasn't what we wanted when we were shooting that day, and I was hoping it would be kind of clear, so it'd be a little easier to work with and motion track the hill to be able to put something fake in there. And of course, it was foggy and snowy, and there was all kinds of problems. And our DP Adam, who's also a good friend of yours, we were kind of like talking about how we were gonna do the shot, and the snow just started falling. It was just beautiful. He's like, "I'm going," and as he's shooting the shot that you see in the proof of concept, and it's a fantastically filmed shot. And the whole time I'm thinking like, "Oh man, this is gonna be a nightmare." And it ended up not being so bad. It kind of worked perfectly, and we kind of leaned into what nature was giving us at that point, and just I was able to kind of go with it. Wasn't able to put the temple hill or the temple on the hill exactly where we wanted. That was one kind of compromise I had. I had to go with, where I could get the motion from the shot to be able to put it somewhere that was convincing. So there's compromises like that. And then that shot went through a number of rounds of iterations on how much fire there should be. Is the smoke, like, did it just start, or has it been going for a long time? Stuff like that, trying to find just the right balance of telling the story that Lydia's, keen on telling. So eventually it came together pretty darn well. Yeah, I think
it's great, man. It's awesome. Man. It's like, whoa, dude. Yeah.
I really credit that to working, all of us working with with nature and the story, of course.
Yeah, it's like a bunch of things that, while it's happening, it had to seem like they'd be a big pain in the ass, but help the shot just get to that elevated level.
Yeah.
I also liked the horse. Great acting. Just
really.
Still looking, perfect eye line.
Seriously,
not fidgeting around like, is it done? Is it getting? We giving it some sugar and an apple? Like, it just stock still. Like,
yeah.
It only occurred to me, like, I think the second time I watched it, I'm like, oh, that horse is doing a great job.
My buddy messaged me after he saw that and said, "Man, that horse just looks fake. You're gonna have to fix the model." No, it's perfect. And yeah, such a good actor. Mm-hmm. And then, occasionally we had takes where it like moving around and fidgeting, but nope, for that one where the snow fell just perfectly and all that, it worked great. So.
Now, for visual effects, a lot of the time, people, I think, it makes people think of sci-fi, fantasy, in a large part because without visual effects, you wouldn't really be able to do a lot of these films. They just wouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. Are those your favorite genres to work in? Like, what's your favorite kind of effect to do? Is it genre-based? Like, how's that go for you?
Those probably are my two favorite genres. Just being able, I really like being able to just create something new, and those genres really kind of lend themselves to being able to create new things that you could only really create with visual effects. Visual effects can apply to so many different genres, and you can create things for any genre, really. But I do think those two kind of lend themselves the most. Those are generally the stories that you would not be able to tell at all, without some kind of visual effects or digital creation.
Yeah, it's and that idea that getting to make something that doesn't exist in the real world, something new, is very appealing then.
It's kind of what drew me into it, I think. Just being able to say, like, oh, I've got this cool idea. What would that look like? So then you sit down and make a 3D model and try it out and, refine things. And, it's a pretty cool process.
You mentioned Lord of the Rings earlier. Is that or is there a film that really, like, you had the moment where you're like, oh, I really got to get into this stuff? Like, how'd that go?
I think I did have that moment, but I think I was too young to really realize it at the time. My parents showed me the original Star Wars when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and, barely could even pay attention and watch it. But they said from that moment on, I was making lightsaber sounds and, fighting imaginary stormtroopers and stuff. And so that franchise has always been, a big part of my life. And thinking like, man, that's so cool. You can just use your imagination, just dream up whatever. Mm-hmm. And take people places where they wouldn't be able to go otherwise.
Do you have a favorite of the Star Wars movies, by the way?
I think it'd be Return of the Jedi for me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, the conclusion, you get to see, the big bad guy without his mask on.
Mm-hmm.
Luke's, he's good. He's on his shit. He's ready to go.
Yeah. I think the confrontation in the throne room is probably the best, for me anyway, the best thing that's in all of Star Wars is just that entire sequence between those three people.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it never gets old. I can't remember the first time I saw it, and it's still incredible to me. Yeah, it never gets old. So with did I ask you? Do you have a favorite movie though?
I mean, that would be my favorite Star Wars movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think The Lord of the Rings collectively is probably still my favorite movie.
Yeah.
Which hasn't been done. I like a lot of movies in different genres too, but like Forrest Gump is up there as one of my favorite movies too. And actually, there's a lot of visual effects. Yeah,
groundbreaking film for that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different applications like that. Generally, it tends to be stuff with more visual effects in it, but yeah, that's up there. Saving Private Ryan's up there for me. I don't know. I have trouble picking just one favorite. But.
Right. I think that Forrest Gump is a great example, though, of having something where there's a lot of visual effects, but still our world,
putting him in the old footage and like the napalm, showing what that would look like. That whole sequence was VFX.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people think isn't visual effects. Mm-hmm. That is, which is something we've talked about a lot lately.
We have,
as well.
yeah.
I didn't realize quite how far that went.
Yeah, because not many people do, really.
Yeah, like even old World War II newsreels where it's like, we're building a B-25 every hour, and you see a big line of bombers, and it's a matte painting. It's like, they were building that many, but you couldn't get that shot because they didn't line them up like that or something.
Right, yeah.
Just mind-blowing stuff, and also how far back all that went. Like, I knew matte paintings had been around forever, but I didn't realize to the degree.
Like, they were using them extensively in, like, the 50s.
And a lot of them being uncredited throughout.
Yes, that's true, too. They didn't want people to know that they were faking their stuff. It's kind of weird that, Hollywood's always been like, oh, let's hide this. Let's not, like... But yeah, they make the magic happen.
Do you think people... if they find out something that they thought wasn't a visual effect is a visual effect, do you think that is disappointing to some people?
It seems like that is disappointing a lot of times. Like, oh, yeah, like, they should have done that for real. It's a lot of times, the reaction people have, which, to be fair, I mean, it is, I mean, I'm a fan that if you can do it for real, do it for real. But, there's budget constraints, time constraints, physical constraints, not being able to go to space and stuff like that. Or have, an alien or whatever. But, I mean, that's kind of goes back, I guess, to what I was saying about marrying all the things together, doing, take a character that you couldn't actually have, for example, do a puppet version and do a digital version for when it has to move around a lot.
Right.
That kind of stuff. You used to see that a lot more in film, and it was a much more convincing, I think. All the fake, movie magic is more convincing when it's working together to kind of, make these things real.
Yeah, I think there's also sometimes I don't think it's just me, but there's sometimes where when people see how a movie is being made, sometimes they like that. Like when they realize it's a visual effect. Not always, but like, when people watch movies from the 80s, and they can see when they're switching from, the monster is a puppet to, now it's walking around and it's stop motion on a blue screen or something. And it's like, I see a lot of people get a lot of joy out of that. Like even though they know how it's being done, it's like we're going in with the idea that it's a movie, it's not real anyway. But for me, my favorite type of visual effect is the type of shot where it has to be a trick. It has to be a visual effect. It's obvious that it's a trick, but it doesn't take me out of the moment in a way. And the best example for that would be when Dorothy opens the door in The Wizard of Oz.
Ah, yeah.
It's like everybody who sees that, how did they do that?
Yeah.
But it overwhelms you with this great sense of wonder. Like, it's obvious they did something there. It's impossible. You know?
Yeah.
But it's one of the most magical moments in film history, you know. And when people see a lightsaber, they know that's not a real thing.
Yeah.
And we can't get enough of it. You know?
We love it. Like, someday that'll be real.
Yeah. I think I saw there's some guy on YouTube who made, like, it's got like a backpack or something.
Oh, I've seen that, yeah.
He made a lightsaber.
You burn through, like, sheets of metal and stuff with it.
It's nuts. It's like, oh, dude.
Like, we're almost there.
Once you have a version of it, you can just make it smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yep, someday.
It'll be, hopefully it'll be as impractical as a lightsaber might actually be in any real situation. It still would be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of something that I think catches our imagination with visual effects and having stuff in movies that we can't really have is it makes you think like, oh, maybe we could have that someday, you know, flying cars and stuff like that. The Jetsons having their, you know, futuristic family and stuff like that, you know.
I think there's somewhere there's a list of inventions that were things that were on Star Trek first. You know, like automatic doors.
Oh, right,
I think was one. Cell phones, which there have been a bunch of ideas for cell phones. Like, but Star
laser
Trek,
guns in general, I think.
I think you're right. There's even I forget if it was an omitted bit of dialogue, but there's a point where Captain Kirk references the Apollo 11 moon landing being successful, and that episode, I believe, came out before the moon landing actually happened.
Oh,
you
wow.
know, so, I mean, which is a little different than what we're talking about, but it's how Star Trek has been ahead of its time.
Yeah.
So many things is cool.
That is really cool. We'll be able to teleport someday.
Now, I think they're working on that. Yeah. Now, when you're animating, do you have, particularly 3D animation, do you have an animation software of choice?
In college, I learned Maya, which I've used for like several years after. I really liked Maya, but it's darn expensive. So in the COVID lockdown, I switched to using Blender, which is a free program. Been around for a very long time, although it was kind of this strange, you know, weird cousin of all the other programs. But they've done a lot of work to really modernize it, standardize it, make it more accessible. Include things that other programs have that it didn't have in the past. So now I really, really, really enjoy using Blender for anything 3D, modeling, rigging, animating, rendering. Even has compositing, so you can put all these, you know, different layers together right in the program if you want.
Yeah.
So that's kind of I love pulling up Blender.
The results that you've been able to get from Blender blow my mind. Like, it's crazy what you've been able to do. Because I think the first time I heard about Blender might have been in college or something, and it was, people mentioned it in a kind of dismissive way. But then you told me, like, hey, Blender just got a little bit better consistently over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And then I saw a short that I think Blender put out that was like, hey, this was all animated in Blender, and the idea was look at what you can make in here. I had a little story to it, and it's crazy how like what you're capable of in Blender. It's really astounding. I mean, I'm a believer in the software too. It's nuts what you're able to do, man.
It really is. Well, yeah, thank you, and it's a testament to them. I mean, it's been a freeware, you know, forever. No talks of ever having it cost money, so it's a great thing to get your foot in the door for 3D if you want to start learning, you know, other programs that are still used by bigger companies. They just had their 25th birthday for Blender.
Oh,
I was trying to think, how old is it? 25
Happy
years.
birthday, Blender.
Happy
That's
birthday,
great.
Blender. I
Well
gave him
done.
$25, and which is ridiculous because most programs like that would cost hundreds. You know,
At least, yeah.
but I was like, man, I gotta donate something to these guys because they're really doing good work.
Right. Now, comparing Maya and Blender, are there advantages that Maya has over Blender that you can talk
I think Maya has more in terms of simulation stuff. It's been around forever, so there's different plugins and things like that, and I haven't been using it the last couple of years, which is plenty of time to kind of fall behind on on the current nose of what they've updated this year in the program and stuff. So I couldn't really tell you exactly, but I know they do have Maya's got pretty much everything that's great, you know, from physics simulations and like fluids and smoke and hair and stuff like that. And Blender has stuff like that too. But Maya's is still regarded as probably the most like biggest, best. It's been around. It's been the staple of especially visual effects for a long, long time. So it does a lot of things really well. But it's also very expensive, so it kind of depends on your situation, what you can use.
Right, and with options like Blender being available, it's it's good to have options.
Yeah, it'll even out the market some, hopefully. Yeah.
And even as as you're doing things with Blender, it's just you're getting even more experience just in this craft yourself. Can I offer you another drink?
Sure.
Perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I want to ask you a bit about inspirations. Okay.
Okay.
So, I've been pleased to work with you a good number of times and continuously on different projects, but I'll just carefully pour these here. And sometimes those are projects where or whether you're working with me or not, sometimes it's a case of, hey, can you remove this mistake, and sometimes it's creating something, and sometimes someone might come to you with a very defined design, but you yourself are a creative guy, and you have your own process and style that you come up with for these, for your work. We talked about some inspirations with like, Lord of the Rings, you like how this is put together and all that. But as far as your art style goes, okay, what are, like, maybe it's other artists, maybe it's other art or whatever, but like maybe it's music, I don't know. But where do you get inspiration? Cheers.
I'm inspired by the process and also by rewatching stuff that I've done or stuff that other people have done that is, that I've thought was, man, that's really good. As far as direct inspiration, I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of one of those things that I've always just enjoyed buckling down, and I like to help other people see their visions through. I think that's kind of a lot of where it comes from, but at the same time, I like to bring my own sense of style to what they're doing, trying to do it in a way that only I would be able to do it. Obviously not in a distracting way that, makes the whole thing mine or something. But in a way that contributes. But right, no, in a way that's like they would pick me to have this project because I'm going to do it in my way, which is a way that they would want it done. I like to when you're making up stuff like in 3D, you can go all over the board with it, whether it's stylized or photorealistic. One second. And I like to try to find a balance between, generally I skew more toward realistic art. Trying to create something that looks real on a computer is just a really fun challenge. And it is a challenge, as we've all seen from sometimes people don't quite get there. But just in terms of like shapes and creating things, I like things to look slightly on the fun side, as long as it doesn't, and it depends on what you're making, but you could put just a little bit more fun and energy into a design and do that, if it fits. Some things you want to be dreary and, stuff, but I guess maybe I personally shy away from that sometimes. it's nice to break it up, but I do like working on stuff that's kind of fun and energetic. And I mean, I go right back to a line from George Lucas saying, like, most designs, you should let a child be able to recognize what that is right away, first glance. And I think that comes from things being fun and, you know, really fitting the criteria for what it's supposed to be.
That's a good point. Yeah, like we all owe George Lucas everything. Honestly, it's like there was a hate train on him for a while, and I'm ashamed to admit that I was part of that for a bit when I realized the prequels weren't perfect or something.
Yeah,
but
me too.
Now I'm like, you know what? He's kind of like Zeus for filmmakers. There's things about he's less problematic than Zeus, sure, but like I mean, there's things about him that like might bug you with what he's done over time, but it's also like if it wasn't for this guy, he wouldn't be here, you know. It's like,
he's achieved enough, I think, to earn a little slack,
right?
You know, like
Exactly.
He's done so many cool things and made contributions to the film industry as a whole.
Changed the way that people make and watch movies. It's nuts.
So he's allowed to make the decision every now and then that makes you kind of wonder, is that really a good idea?
Do you understand your film? But
those are much fewer than his, I think, good, great ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And that having a quick recognition, like what you said, he said about a child being able to recognize a character immediately. Like that's something that, whether it's the geometry of something or the color, like just going on the opening shot in Star Wars Episode 4, like the ships coming over. It's a mind-blowingly great shot. Something that I love about it too is the geometry in it. Just by like the shape of everything, you can tell who the bad guys are, and like who's dangerous, and how it also points. It's like,
you're good.
Yeah, but
no, you're right from that shot. The bad guys are very angled and kind of marching forward, obviously chasing, and then Leia's ship has this round, like less intimidating kind of front, and it's a good example of. Right away, you can see like, oh, that's kind of round and soft, and these guys are sharp and
dangerous, like a bunch of arrowheads or something. Yeah. Cool. So we've gone through like different software, some of your inspirations, and
I have a question for you.
Oh,
do you have a favorite visual effects shot?
It's Dorothy opening the door.
Okay.
Yeah, which technically...
Did you say that was your favorite shot?
I forget if I did. I said it's the best example for my favorite type of visual effect, I think. Yeah. But technically that shot, where the line is drawn on visual effects, I know you know this, it's for the people at home, where the line on whether something is a visual effect or not is drawn is really fuzzy.
Oh, yeah.
Technically, that shot... And there are visual effects in The Wizard of Oz. Like, there's double exposure stuff, there's matte paintings, there's, like, even just in the tornado where you see outside the window, the witch or the chicken coop or the guys rowing. It's like, that's a visual effect. Movies from the 1930s, it's a visual effect because visual effects have been going on since the late 1800s. But that shot of Dorothy opening the door is my... It's interesting that it's also kind of a visual effects shot because that is my favorite shot in cinema history.
Really?
My favorite shot in a movie ever is when Dorothy opens the door to Munchkin Land, because that shot, and by extension that moment, that beat of the story, has basically everything that a movie can have in it. It's got black and white, it's got color, it has silence, it has music, if you extend the moment to when she has the line, it has dialogue, it has an iconic line of, like, we're not in Kansas anymore. It's got, but it's got even more than that, where that entire shot is in camera. And what I mean by that is The girl who opens the door isn't the actress Judy Garland. It's a body double. It's a different actor. And she's wearing a sepia tone dress.
That's how they got it black and white.
And the inside
and the
is that. Yep. So that entire shot is in color. When I was a kid, I'm like, did they cut this out frame by frame? No, they didn't. They had the film shot what people call black and white, done in sepia tone, which isn't not totally black and white. It's got that sort of brownish orange hue to it.
Yeah.
And then they colored this. They painted the set that color. Had the actress wear a dress that color. And she's got Toto in the basket. She opens the door. We see the color. And then when she goes off screen, she takes the basket and hands it to Judy Garland, who walks forward in the blue dress. And every single time that shot comes up, I just weep. I'm like, I love movies so much, and this is everything. It's like it's got like two people playing one character, or like stunts or doubles. It's got wardrobe design in it. It's got the writing. It's got the story. It's got the color. It's got the black and white. It's got the music. It's got the dialogue. It's got like everything a movie can have.
Yeah, time to go on an adventure.
In that one beat. Yeah, like it's wonderful, and it never gets old. And
that's awesome. Now I'm gonna weep every time I see it too, because now I know the full extent of that shot. That was one of my favorite movies too. I used to be able to do the Tin Man's dance when I was a little kid.
Oh,
I loved that. Yeah,
good.
Probably couldn't do it now, but it's a great movie. I have not seen in way too long.
Dude, they're going to be having a screening of it at the Science Center. I think in April, and the big screen they have there, I'm probably going. So maybe we should go.
Yeah, we should go. That'd be cool.
I saw The Wizard of Oz at they did a screening at the Waterfront at AMC Waterfront, and years ago, and it's just classic movie night, and sold out for The Wizard of Oz, and so they did another night, and it sold out again, and I just love that. It's the most watched movie in history,
really,
theoretically. Like who's counting? But apparently, if you add up all the times it's been on TV and people tuned in and all that, it's apparently not close. The most watched movie is supposed to be The Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
I think it's a great choice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's and scary for kids too. I mean, it scared me. That tornado. Oh my gosh.
Tornado, the monkeys.
The Wicked Witch herself.
Yeah, the witch
fire.
herself.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Big dude's head yelling at you.
Oh, yeah. Terrifying. And fun and just wholesome. And I love it. There's a woman who's still alive. Her name is Karen Marshall. And she was, I don't believe she was the stand-in who opened the door. I haven't really been able to find out. But she was one of Judy Garland's stand-ins or doubles. I think she did some of the dancing or something. She was involved, and she was there with Judy Garland as Dorothy. And while she was, she's like 104 or 5 or more years old. She's still around, and she, at the time they were doing The Wizard of Oz, they were she was going back and forth between that set and the set of Gone with the Wind as an extra.
Really?
She was in both of those. And
wow, what a resume.
Yeah, right. Like two of the great, and I sent her a fan letter a few years ago just to be like, hey,
oh, really?
Just found out about you, and I just want I love this movie, and so that's good. But,
that's awesome.
Honestly, I've seen a lot of movies that had visual effects in them that weren't up to snuff, perhaps, but that wasn't what ever. Maybe not ever, but that was almost never what's ruined a movie for me. Is the visual effects. The visual effects are almost never the problem.
I
with
agree.
The movie.
Yeah,
it's like if you're getting to the point where you're having a hard time with the visual effects, it's either an exceptional case of being really bad visual effects. It's either frankly exceptional, or there's so much wrong with the movie that you've gotten to the point where you're complaining about the visual effects. I'm saying you in a theoretical sense, not you specifically.
No, it's just me.
In fact, I'm saying me too. Yeah, but that's what I usually have found, and Yeah, that's what I see that they get scapegoated a lot, you know.
Yeah, I think it's too bad.
Yeah, it's like, I think that's odd.
Tends to be the case. Oh, it didn't. You got taken out of the moment because the visual effects weren't perfect in that spot, and that certainly happens sometimes. If it's not a priority, I feel like that's kind of the thing we're getting to nowadays. Is like we can do anything pretty effectively given enough time, and if it's made the right way. Used to be more of like a we really have to focus on this. Like this has to be freaking perfect. Or nowadays it's just like, we'll shoot whatever, and then the visual effects guys will just do, whatever they do, as opposed to kind of moving through the whole process saying we need to make sure that this looks absolutely perfect. And it seems like a lot of directors don't always, treat visual effects with the amount of respect that they probably should. And I think that leads sometimes to they get to post and it's like, oh man, like we could have done this shot pretty easily if it was filmed, this way, but now we have to deal with this, and this. So it's much harder to get a great result than it would have been, if that had been. And I don't want to be like, every movie that uses VFX should just like film the whole thing only thinking about the visual effects. That's obviously it's got to be a marriage of all the things.
It's clearly becoming it's a more important factor than it's ever been for filmmaking. And in the relative scheme of filmmaking, and by that I mean on a generational level, visual effects are still really new. A lot of the filmmakers who are most prominent today predate probably most of the technology that you see in most movies. It's like you have exceptional cases like Martin Scorsese, where with The Irishman, they're using this really incredible de-aging stuff.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
And he was making good movies before anything like that existed.
Yeah.
And it looks amazing in The Irishman because he's a damn good filmmaker. And like he's not the one who's doing the visual effect, but he's going
to make sure it looks great though.
Yeah,
he knows to respect each part. Looks. Yeah, each part of the process needs respect. And you look at a recent example I thought of was Jurassic Park. Like in the old original Jurassic Park, you see way less of the dinosaurs because it was that much harder back then. But they actually, even today, look really good still because they really focused on, making they made sure each one looked the best it possibly could. Where now some of the new ones, not that they look bad or anything, but it's just kind of like we're just throwing it all in there and, that onto the next thing.
And there's less of a, maybe less of a heightened concern. I don't want to armchair psychologist whoever worked on these films or anything like that, but there's different.
I mean, a lot of effort was put into it, and
there's different things at stake. Culturally. It's like there's a difference between there's a bunch of CGI in movies now versus no one's ever seen anything like this.
True.
Really gonna pull it off.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So now, is there anything that visual effects can't do right now?
Oh boy.
Like, is there a limit to our imagination?
That's the limit. I think is our imagination, really. I mean, I think one of the coolest visual effects in recent years, which I just saw another post about recently, was when they were making Interstellar. And we didn't have pictures of a black hole yet. We didn't know what it looked like. So they just used science, and they developed a brand new rendering engine to be able to capture, hopefully this is what, the world of physics tells us a black hole should look like. And it was only a couple years after that we actually got images, and they got it right. Because
it's crazy.
It's really wild. I mean, then they used science to inform what it should look like, and then that came to be true, and that's a pretty cool case where like we don't know what this looks like. So I guess it's imagination, but it's also playing within the world that we're in as well. We kind of have to keep those things together as much as possible, in my opinion, anyways. But,
yeah. I think there's I want to backtrack just a little bit.
Sure.
Which is there's a lot of reasons why visual effects can work or fall apart. It's almost like getting a joke to land in a film is a miracle because first off, you have to have someone who is able to write something that's actually funny. You know, barring improv on set, you know, but I mean, like, you have to actually have someone who is able to write something that's funny, which not everybody is able to do. You have to get an actor who can also has comedic chops and can deliver, let's say it's a witty line that gets a laugh from the audience. You have to also make sure that it's filmed in such a way that the joke is communicated, you know, and you have to make sure it's edited so that the timing isn't screwed up, because maybe the actor has good comedic timing, but maybe the editor doesn't, and they mess it up and it's not funny anymore. There's one film I can think of right now where there's something that's supposed to be a joke in it, and the joke is ruined by the editing. Oh no, which is a shame. And then also, let's say none of those people are the director. You know, they could screw it up at any moment the entire time. Yeah. You know, and then you've also got, you know, like the sound, making sure everybody can hear it. It's like, and all the way through to like having a thing that's just as simple as like trying to get your audience to laugh. The fact that jokes ever land in movies is a miracle. It is. You know, it's insane. Visual effects is a lot like that. Yeah, I think. It is actually. A lot of things can go wrong. And even with what we'll call the big leagues, the A-listers, where, there's maybe timing with the script, or like, you know, leaving something too late, or changing something, or maybe there's budget issues, or they didn't film something right on set. But I think it's fair to say that most filmmakers want their visual effects to be good.
Very true. It's true, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes with experience. So, like, I mean, the first few visual effects projects I did, they were my first ones. I didn't know anything about it. A lot of things that were wrong, or could have been done a little bit to make things easier for myself later. You know, but I learned from that, certainly. Yeah. But then you have people like Martin Scorsese, who, I mean, it's not fair because he's the best, but who takes something that no one's ever done before, or Spielberg with Jurassic Park. Takes them, and once again, it's not fair because they're the best, but taking something that no one's ever done before and getting it right the first time, okay? There's got to be a methodology of that process, because they're not the ones who are even the ones doing the visual effects.
I feel like both those guys probably had their failures as well. You know, maybe not
at some points,
not something perhaps that we see publicly, but well, you know, like Spielberg struggled with Jaws quite famously. That's so you know, he learned some stuff there, I'm sure, about animatronics and all that kind of stuff. Martin Scorsese, I don't know any specific example like that, but I feel like we all kind of learn from our failures to a fair degree.
What I'm leading up to is for, let's say there's a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed filmmaker who's perhaps watching or listening to this. If you're here, thank you for joining us. Who's interested, maybe they've never done a visual effect in any of their films before, beyond maybe putting some credits in iMovie with a transition, you know. But they want to do some visual effects in their film. What are some common pitfalls that filmmakers might do? Obviously not naming names here, especially if it's me. But what are some common pitfalls filmmakers can make that could be avoided with just something you could say right now? Do you think?
Make sure the lighting is exactly what you want, and that I kind of have to leave that a little open-ended because it's different for a lot of situations. Just a little bit of research ahead of time on what's the best way to do this. Not that you always be able to shoot something the best way possible, but as long as you know you can get even just a little bit closer to that, you'll help yourself out tremendously later down the line. Making sure, you know, if you're going to use motion trackers or something like that, use those the correct way, in ways that will be easier to you know, utilize them down the road. I mean, that's really it. Just a little bit of preparation. Like I said, I don't think any filmmaker should be like, oh, you know, let's just put everything else on hold and, you know, focus on these effects, practical, digital, whatever. But it is something like every other aspect of film, you know, just a little bit of preparation and doing a little research. The internet's a great tool. Do a little research, and you'll get yourself a lot closer to where you want to be, than, you know, just hoping for the best and being sorry later.
A lot of typically visual effects is thought of as something in post-production because it's you're altering the footage after the fact.
Good point. Yeah.
Have you experienced, present company excluded, filmmakers coming to you after they've shot something and being like, "Hey, you're an animator, visual effects artist. I've already done this thing, like shot it and stuff. Can you make it happen?"
Yeah, I think you can make something happen. It may not be the very best you could have done, but I mean that's kind of your test as an artist. You got to be able to say like, okay, like we could have done this, this, and this, but this is what we got. So,
but I mean, make the
best of it.
Have you run into that a lot, where filmmakers will come to you after the fact instead of having you involved in the production?
Not a ton, thankfully.
Good.
It's happened. It's happened a couple times, and I think all those times we were able to. Occasionally, you need to compromise something and say like, well, it'd be great if we could do this, but and given our current circumstance, we kind of have to do the best with what we have. And sometimes you can end up making something incredible that way, or you think about it this way the whole time, or somebody hands you something and you're trying to make something work in this direction and it's just not working. So then you come up with a new creative solution that is better, sometimes even better than your original intention. So you got to be able to think on your feet and pivot sometimes.
When you're working at your computer, do you listen to music or anything?
Sometimes, or I like sometimes just having a sitcom on, occasional funny jokes, but it's not like, super distracting or intellectual or anything,
Do you work with drawings a lot?
I like to, when possible, it depends how complicated the thing is, but it is nice to do some kind of basic drawings or more complicated drawings if it's a real big thing. I do less of that though now, and I should really do more of it like I used to. But there's been occasional things you and I have worked on where just a simple drawing, even if it's just an outline, really helps save some time later down the line, or just get the basics of the design, ironed out, and then you can kind of go a little more crazy in 3D later.
Particularly the storyboards for animation.
Yes,
and stuff,
yeah.
So.
The storyboards and the designs. I mean, there's a reason concept art is so widely used, because it really helps everybody kind of get on the same page with the thing. And I've always thought concept art was really cool. So yeah, I would definitely say that's important.
You mentioned a little bit about some of your favorite types of visual effects. Not that you don't love every single second that you've spent working on absolutely everything, but is there a part of visual effects or animation that you could do without, that you'd prefer not to do, or you hate?
I don't think there's any part of it that I hate. There's some stuff that occasionally you'll run into something where you have this clear idea, and sometimes you'll do this, with a director or somebody else you're working with, where it's like, this should really work like this. This is how we both see it in our heads. This is how we want it to be, and it just doesn't. Whether it's trying to make something realistic, you have to bring more physics into it, and your imagination can say, oh, this should do this and that should move like that. And you go to build it in 3D and try to use the laws of physics and general motion to make it look realistic, and it just doesn't work the way you think it should. That can be pretty frustrating. Also, physics simulations, that's probably the one thing I kind of struggle with the most. First of all, because you need a very strong computer to be able to do any kind of physics simulation, whether it's water or fire or anything.
Yeah, real quick, if someone doesn't know, what's a physics simulation?
A physics simulation is where the computer will, you kind of set up the scene to do something, whether it's a building falling over and you've got bits of computer geometry colliding with each other, or there's water, like you have the computer generates, just a stream of water, and you have to make it look realistic or fit in with an existing location or something. Or fire, you need an explosion. They're going to create that digitally, and it's simulated. In today's world, it's simulated using real physics, as much as possible. And you have a lot of play, a lot of, different variables and values you can change to influence what those things look like. But the process ends up, you need a very strong computer because it takes a lot of computing power to be able to do these things. So there's that kind of barrier of entry where you need a strong enough computer to even, try to do something that looks professional in today's world. But then there's also iterations of time after time after time of trying something and trying to fine tune it. And you need to, there's a process called caching where the computer will figure out all these things, not in real time. It can take hours sometimes for it to cache out a sequence and say, okay, the water would do like this and like that, and the fire would do like this, and wrap around, whatever this person's arm or something. Depends on how detailed you want to get. And it's a very long, tedious process that can require lots of, you wait hours for this thing to finish, you look at it, and it's not perfect, or it's horribly wrong. And then you got to do it again, and try again, try a different thing, approach it a whole different way sometimes. It's a fun challenge, but it can be very time consuming and a little, a lot of back and forth sometimes, in my experience anyways.
It's almost like ballistics where for simulations, it sounds like
Yeah,
where you
yeah.
set up a cannon and you're trying to get something that you have an idea of what you want to get to, but if there's wind or whatever, just something happens that just doesn't get it where you want it to be.
The VideoCopilot guys did a video not too long ago. Or
Andrew Kramer.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It's the other guys. Collider. No.
Corridor
Corridor.
Digital.
Yeah, why could I not think of that? Sorry, guys.
Never miss a video. Big fans of
Corridor Crew guys are absolutely awesome. And they did a really fun video one time where they had this little obstacle course. I think it was mostly involving like ping pong balls and throwing them.
It's
and
like
stuff.
a Rube Goldberg machine.
Yeah, kind of. The one guy, he's trying to throw like the ping pong ball, bounce it off this thing and get it in a cup, and doing these kind of physics-based little like tricks. And the other guy is doing the same thing in the computer and trying to recreate this, and they're doing it at the same time to see like which one's harder. And I can't remember. It's been a minute since I watched. I can't remember if they really decided which one was harder. But it's kind of a similar thing where in the computer you say like, okay, ping pong ball is going to go like this, and so you try that and you see, and it's like, oh nope, that was wrong. Let's grab it. Let's throw it a little differently. And it's remarkably similar to real life, and because it's just going to take the laws of physics and apply it to this completely artificial thing. Very cool, but yeah, it can be a struggle sometimes for sure.
Yeah. They've done a couple of those where it's like man versus machine. It's like a John Henry race or something with computer animation simulations versus one of the guys on their team doing something. And it's a lot of fun. They get to be very exciting whenever I've seen them. They're really good. Is there for any filmmaker who's looking to get into, whether getting into visual effects or want to learn more so that they can work better with visual effects artists like yourself or animator, what's a resource that would be helpful for them to learn from?
The Corridor Crew guys are great. They have a ton of good videos on not only pushing the boundaries of these things, but also just in utilizing them in general. The VideoCopilot, my brain jumped to earlier. Those guys, Andrew Kramer, I mean, it seems to me like they're a little less active in tutorials lately, but they do have a lot of great stuff. If even if it's an older version of After Effects, they don't really remove all that much, so most of those should still be pretty intact as far as tutorials go. And I mean, Reddit is, for me, as basic as it seems, it's a pretty frequent source of, I'm having this specific problem, somebody else has had it, and you have answers there. So definitely, and YouTube tutorials too. Sometimes you can find a tutorial. And a lot of times, if I'm doing something brand new that I've never done before, I won't just watch one video on it. I'll watch 2 or 3 or 4. Just to learn some different ways that other people do it, and I'll end up kind of blending things like, oh, I like how this guy does that, or this girl does that, and kind of put them together into, how I like to do it and make it my own. So I think that's kind of a cool way to work, and it's done well for me, at least so far. So
Awesome.
recommend it.
Well, Jesse, is there anywhere online that people could perhaps follow you or, just to see the kind of work that you've been doing?
My website is firstresortmedia.com. So I have a lot of my stuff on there. I do need to update it, but I'll be working on that this spring.
Everybody always does.
Is that what everybody says?
Everybody I've met is like, I got to update my website. And I am one of those people as well. I haven't updated in way too long. But everyone, we're going to have that link in the description below. So check that out. Make sure you see. And anything else that, other ways perhaps to follow Jesse and all that will be down there. And you'll be able to check that out. So don't forget it. Jesse, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we'll need to do it again sometime, of course. And we'll figure that out, and we'll need to talk about you made your own video game and all kinds of stuff. But we'll have you on again sometimes. Thanks again for making the time to get down here. Glad we could do it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been great.
Absolutely, well, it was my pleasure. And everybody, hope you've enjoyed that. And if you have, if you're the type of person to subscribe, we'd love to have you for next time. And whatever the case, thanks for joining us, because we're going to be here again at StudioME. So, bye-bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioME.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.